really need to have as basic training for police officers. I don't know that in the current curriculum, the word empathy is ever used. And I have all the current lesson plans for the state academy, and I would be surprised if the word is used even more than one time. And that's the source of things like ethics and de-escalation and cultural relations and anti-racism, and pretty much a good sound service philosophy has to spring from at least some sort of empathy.
You talked about anti-racism. Do you think there are also racist? I mean, why not? I mean, I can tell you there are racist elements in every organization, even universities, right? Even every universities.
Yeah, every group. Yeah.
You know, I've seen racist professors, right? Seriously, my colleagues, not my colleagues where I teach, but in general, I'm talking about it. I've seen racist researchers. I've seen racist martial artists. I mean, oh God, in martial arts, sure. God, so many, not many, but you know what I mean. So, I mean, this is not, this is something, I mean, I always say racism, we talk about racism, and then all of a sudden people try to bring it up and say, okay, now this racism is a problem of one organization, which is not, right?
It's a problem everywhere.
Everywhere. So let's come back to that. And because you mentioned the word anti-racism, what does the police do to combat these elements or these rising up of these things?
Well, you can't remove bias from any human being. So you have to be able to quantify it and evaluate it and then deal with it when it is manifested in their actions. So the only way to do that outside of doing some sort of, psychological character-based training, which I'm sorry, but that's what our parents are supposed to be doing for our entire lives growing up. I don't think there's much that we can do training that way, but we can go over, legislative impacts. We can go over rules of behavior, specific examples of conduct that is acceptable and unacceptable. I can't change your heart by making a rule, and I can't change your heart by giving you a class. But I can show you what's going to happen if your heart leads you to do something that you're not supposed to do based on our societal standards. And that's the best I think we can ever achieve.
Yes. We just say, for example, let's go back to ethics as exactly what you mentioned. We say punishment level is necessary, but it's the lowest level because then people are afraid. For example, if I go in ethics, we say, I see this, right? And it's okay, it's a very valuable pen. I mean, it's not, it's a plastic one, but in general. And I know yeah, exactly. And then it's somewhere. And then maybe, my parents didn't teach me, oh, look, Manusha, you shouldn't steal it. It's not okay. So I don't look at it and I didn't tell me. So I just want to steal it and I go and steal it. But something prevents me. It could be the religion, or it could be I'm not religious or whatever. I don't give a damn. Or it could be that there is a camera there and I'm afraid it's going to be recorded. Or it could be that there's a witness. And so I don't do it. But this is the lowest level. Even if you're religious, this is the lowest level because it's not, but because you don't want to go to hell, right? But then we say, if you have a value system where, as you said, your parents taught you, you do not steal something which does not belong to you, period, right? And I grew up all my life, right? So I don't do that. But then, now let's stick to this value system. Now, if we have this value system, now, how can we teach this value to people? You see, this is the problem right now. Do I take some? Exactly. How can I teach that? Can I just teach that to a person? Can I expose it to him at a later stage that these values are ingrained and integrated in him or her? What do you think as a police officer, Rich?
I think that's completely subjective too. I think there's plenty of people that would go, oh, I didn't know that was the rule, but now you told me that's the rule, and so I'll follow that rule. And then there's other people based on, their level of narcissism or sociopathy or any other psychological issues that will be either more difficult to teach or to train or impossible. And it's an interesting thing that I did when I was running police academies, and I would run 8 police academies a year with each about 30 people in them for a total of probably 10 years. And then prior to that, I was involved in a number of police academies outside of that. So over 1,000 students, absolutely, and probably over 2,000. I always ask this question, because these are law enforcement officers that have gone through background checks and all other sorts of things. I'd ask them, number one, have you ever done illegal drugs? And normally I would pick something harsh like heroin or methamphetamine or something like that. And I said, this is completely anonymous. I want you to write your answers down on a piece of paper that you're going to hand in with no name, no identifying mark, no nothing. And then, of course, I expect them to say no, although I have been surprised once or twice in my life by somebody who says, yes, I have. And then the follow-up question is, why not? Why haven't you done this particular drug? And in every single circumstance since I started teaching classes, and I would ask this to virtually every academy class, I had not one person answer me because it's illegal. Not one time did anybody ever say the reason I haven't done this particular drug or committed this particular crime is because it's illegal. Everyone always came up with, well, I was taught as an early age that it was bad for me, or that it would mess up my brain, or it would make my family look bad. Any number of reasons, but no one ever said the reason I didn't do drugs is because it's illegal. But of course, we still need them to be illegal for obvious reasons, but deterrence is not one of them. And so a lot of those value systems, it doesn't matter if stealing is against the law. If you're brought up right, you're not going to steal. And you can be trained later in life to do some things, but some things you can't. So I think it depends on the person.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yes, I fully agree. So a lot also depends on the value system on the person. It steers the person. I fully agree with you. You know, yeah. This is clear. I mean, we say it as well, you know, because when we teach corporate ethics, part of us is, you know, fair treatment of employees, also anti-corruption. And then the question for us is, you know, for example, you have an executive who has been earning millions, and then he still commits corruption. And we are talking about Western countries with such laws.
Yeah, it's because it's part of personality.
Yeah, and I ask myself, I mean, we are talking about Western countries with lots of mechanisms to combat corruption. And then, you know, we had a case here in Germany, and this guy was making, you know, both top executive millions, and he committed still corruption. And I just asked myself, Rich, guy, you have been earning millions. Why do you do this?
Why would you risk it in the first place? But I'm a firm believer in social constraints theory, that the more family ties that a person has and the more positive role models that person has, the more likely they are to be good people. And I think that's part of the problem we have in the U.S. is a lot of our subcultures have really fragmented the family, and there are no social constraints. In fact, we have a lot of communities where the opposite exists, where not only are there no social constraints, but there are social pressures to commit negative acts and to do things that we would regard as being negative. So speaking to one of your original questions about why we have a high crime rate, that's definitely a big part of it.
Yeah. And another question, Rich, you know, because I mean, United States specifically, that's what I really love about your country. And I can mention that someone who has been living in Europe for a while, Europe is Germany, and I compare it to the United States. I keep saying it also now openly on this channel. I know some Europeans don't want to admit it, but I can talk about myself, about my Iranian background, that the level of integration in the United States is light years ahead of where I live now. I know some people don't like it, but I mean, come on. Facts need to be stated because I know these two, right? I can make a valid comparison. And okay, now saying that about the United States and the level, that's why one of the reasons I love United States is this, right? But then talking about the level of integration in the United States. Now, for example, if you have a police, because you teach in the academy, when you go to certain community, is it good to have a police officer who shares the same background with that community to serve in that community? Is it a good idea, or you cannot generalize, you cannot tell that?
I would think if that particular person is available, then yes, they would definitely be an asset. I don't think that it would be fair to say someone who's not from that community would not be able to do that job or to be able to interact with people of that community, because you can learn community ideals. And even though I don't live in a community with immigrants from, and let's just pick a place, Eastern Africa. If I work there long enough and I am interested and I talk to enough people in that community, I can understand in not a really long time what the basic community ideals are, what the cultural norms are. And I can, if I'm interested in doing that, I can certainly learn that in a fairly timely manner. But it depends on whether or not the person has that energy and that desire to want to learn. So I always think that if that person is available, it's good to have that person as a go-to person. But at the same time, it's on the officers as community service agents to get in and learn from the people that are in their own community. And one of the things I always used to do, especially because working at nights, I had more time, was anytime I got an opportunity to meet somebody, particularly somebody who was not from either my state or my country, which in our area, there were people from more countries than I could ever remember, was I would just sit and talk to them and ask them, you know, hey, how do you like it here? How long have you been here? What's it like where you came from? How do you see things that go on around here versus how do I see things? Because like we said before, everyone has biases. You can't function without a bias. But until I understand what your biases are, I can't deal with you on the same level that I could otherwise. So that's just part of understanding people, and it goes back to empathy. If I don't know what it's like to be you, how can I deal with you in an optimal way?
That's right. Just another question. I mean, I know you cannot, again, really give an answer, but just feeling. I mean, it's not scientific. Is night shift more dangerous on the street for a police officer or day shift? You cannot say that.
I don't think there's much of a difference. I know that the policing itself is different, but I don't know that the danger level is different, because we had probably as many shootings on night shift as we did on the day shift, but it was different kinds. You have bank robberies in the daytime, but you have bank burglaries at night, and burglars have a different psychology than robbers. But we also have convenience store robbers are more prolific at night because there's less people around, and the convenience stores are the only places that open, and they're predominantly cash businesses. So, you know, liquor stores, convenience stores, things like that. I don't think that one is necessarily more dangerous. The day watch, daytime policing is busier, for sure. Night times, we have more time to go and find criminals rather than answering calls for service. So the potential is always there, but I don't think that there's really much danger difference.
Rich, one question I have, you talked about the psychology of burglars, bank burglars is different from robbers. In which context, in which sense, what do you mean?
Well, burglars are trying to get away with something. They don't want to be seen. They don't want to interact with people. They want to go in and steal in the quiet and the dark of night and get away without ever being noticed. The robber is the person who is looking for that face-to-face confrontation. The robber is the one who goes in and takes something from you personally, not from your closed business or your empty house. So that person is necessarily more violent than the burglar.
Do we have a drop in bank robberies in the United States? I mean, in the recent... It seems like, right?
It does seem like, but I can't say for sure because I haven't looked at the statistics. But I know just from my own personal experience, we don't hear about them as much.
I think it's one of the reasons because banks don't keep so much cash as they used to.
And if you rob a bank, you'll be investigated by the FBI, and they have a lot more resources than most local police departments. So the likelihood of you being caught is a lot higher.
Okay.
And I think people I think just TV and things in general, people understand that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, this is also very, very interesting. And okay, Rich, do you want to add something to our discussions at the moment? I mean, today?
Oh, geez, there's so much to talk about and so many topics to cover that I wouldn't know where to start. So, yeah,
Just one question I have. One question.
Yeah, sure.
Do you teach your police officers what they what they should do? That's a really strange question. But if they get shot, what should they do if they get shot during service?
We have a number of classes on tactics and survival and mindset, because mindset is very important in any stressful environment. Probably in the last 10 years, personal first aid has really become integrated into police training. Most police agencies of any size or in metro areas have pretty good first aid training. They issue tourniquets to the officers. One of the things that we're fortunate to have in this country is our, ambulance system is prolific and very available, except in the most rural places that you can find. So the average police officer, even if they do get shot, if the wound is survivable, they will survive.
Okay. Okay. So this is okay. Very, very nice. And then what is may I ask you, I mean, if there is something you can share, what kind of pistol or weapon do American police officers carry?
75% of the officers in the United States carry Glock pistols, either 9mm, 40 caliber, or 45. The current trend is to switch to 9mm because they are cheaper. It is a perception factor among officers that don't have a lot of firearms training that a 9mm is somehow easier to shoot than the other ones, and because the mental part of any skill is a very important part. If they believe it's easier, then it becomes easier. So the cost and the ease are probably the two really driving factors right now. When I policed, we started out with revolvers.
Really?
357 Magnum revolvers were our issued weapons.
Okay.
Then we went to 9mm Berettas. Then we went to 40 caliber Glocks. Then we went to 45 caliber Glocks, and my department just switched back to 9mm Glocks. So it's a continuing thing, but one of my own favorite personal sayings is any gun is better than no gun. And, it's not the bullet that does the shooting. It's the shot placement. That's what counts.
Yes.
There's all sorts of studies, and you can have anecdotal evidence that this round is better than that round. But really, if you put the right shots on the right spot on the right target, then you'll win.
Yeah. And another question I have, you also teach car chasing. Do I remember it correctly?
Formal pursuit training is very difficult to accomplish because one, the United States is very litigious, and when I speak to some of my friends I think the last one I talked to was an inspector with the Dutch police. They get out on the roads in traffic and they do pursuit training. We're not permitted to do that. We have an isolated track that we can practice high-speed driving, and to a degree we can practice chasing one another, but we're not actually allowed to simulate a high-speed pursuit. Now, that being said, there were times working the morning watch where if we had a place where there was no real traffic and we thought we might be able to have a mock pursuit with another police car, that we would take that liberty sometimes. But in retrospect, it probably wasn't the best idea, because thankfully nothing bad ever happened. But what if something did? of course, the liability would be on the person who decided that that was a good idea to have that particular training, and no telling what would happen. But so, yeah, that's an area where we don't get very much training. It's only on the job when it happens.
And then they're permitted to chase, of course, if it happens.
And that in and of itself creates a huge liability issue, because it's the first time you've ever done something. You're doing it in real life,
yes,
under real stress, under real circumstances. That's not a good way to learn. So I think that's one place where we are very deficient, and we should figure out somewhere in between of what we have and what we would like to have ideally, and figure out a way to do that.
So do you understand you? Excuse me. Do I understand you correctly? You are allowed to chase and bump your car into criminal car. Are you allowed to do that? Okay, you are.
Yes. That is something. Sorry about that. That is something. It's called the PIT maneuver, pursuit intervention technique. It has a couple other names. Back in the day, we just called it wrecking them. But it's a very scientific procedure, and we can practice that under controlled circumstances. But again, doing it under controlled circumstances is nothing like doing it in real life.
Yeah.
The stress levels, the variables that you can't account for in a contained parking lot. We can teach you the basics, but until you actually go out there and do it a time or two in real life, you can't really say that you know how to do it.
Thank you very much, Rich, for your valuable information on police work in the United States. I'm sure many of our members and viewers would love to hear to an experienced officer as you are, and trainer, instructor, not only officer. And thank you for sharing your valuable insights into this work. I'm sure many people, it was an honor really to have you on my channel, really. And thanks for accepting it. Do you have anything to add, to say to our viewers, or something you would like to share?
Well, we did talk about empathy a lot, and especially if they're in the United States, I'd like to see a little bit more empathy for the police officers that are out there every day trying to do their job, and who are honestly very good people and really out to help us all. We're all on the same team. That's the way we need to look at things. And other parts of the world, I encourage you to come visit.
Yeah,
we'll do our best to treat you well.
Thank you very much, Rich.
Sure.
Okay, then have a nice day. And we are going to have you then in another session, because I'm just going to add, because Rich is also an expert on weapons, ancient weapons. So we are going to, like swords, bronze swords, and so on, iron. And so we are going to have him to share his insights on that in another session. So for today, I'm going to say goodbye to Rich. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.